All right, welcome back to Buffalo Plus, our YouTube page presented by BuffaloPlus.com. Mike Catalana. I am Jenna Cottrell. The NFL, Mike, has been talking about it. We know it's going to happen, adding a 17th game to the regular season schedule. What do you think of that? What do you make of that?
I don't like it. And it's not, I had somebody I mentioned on Twitter and somebody's like, oh, what, you guys complaining about covering an extra game? I go, no, it's not about covering an extra game. What I love about the NFL is all the games matter. Now, going from 16 to 17 doesn't all of a sudden take that out of the picture. But Jenna, they already added the playoff teams. They've changed that format, only one team getting the bye. And now you've added a 17th regular season game. I don't like that part. I don't like that the regular season games just become a little less important. And that's what the NFL has over every other league, where every game matters from September all the way through to the end of the regular season. So for that reason, I wish they would have just stuck at 16.
I completely agree. And I also think of, in terms of talking so much about player safety and all these things, adding an extra game, it's going to be now a gauntlet to keep your key players healthy for the entirety of the season. How much rest do you give them? With those games later on in the year, like, are you going to be resting players for maybe 2 weeks? Or how do you kind of go about that? And I agree. It's just like a watered down thing. Look, you're right. It's not the MLB. It's not 162 games, obviously. But I love the 16 game regular season schedule. I also love the 8 and 8. It's going to be even. You know what you're
like
getting.
All that symmetry, make it right.
I like all of that. I do. I will say the one thing that I'm into is that the Super Bowl would now be the day before President's Day. Yeah. So most people, unlike us who work a normal schedule, would have that Monday off to recuperate. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I think that adds to it, because they didn't want to see. This is the NFL. I mean, they're smart about one thing. There were years where they would start the regular season on Labor Day weekend, and the ratings were bad. I mean, look, it's for much of the country. That's the last summer weekend, and kids are out of school, and the ratings were down. So they've always pushed it to past that. So in order to either have 2 bye weeks, which I would have preferred, again, stick with 16 games, give each team 2 byes. You get another week of TV coverage and then move the Super Bowl back. But they figure, heck, if we're going to, have an extra week, why not put everybody playing games there? You do have the other part where this year, all the AFC teams are going to get the home field. And then next year, it's supposed to be all the NFC teams, though they could be using international sites those weeks. So say you're a team like Washington that's playing in Buffalo, because that's the game that it's supposed to be. Yeah. Then next year, Washington is the home team, but they get sent to London for that game. So, even within your own division, you may be a team that ends up playing, one less home game, and you have a neutral site game. I mean, that's happened at other times too, when teams have to give it up for the neutral site, but that just adds another dynamic. Look, I say this, and I know there's more money, and we've just seen this contract, but Jenna, at some point, don't they have to increase the amount of players active on game day, the 100%. Amount of players on a roster?
Completely. And I think that is one thing that plays into it. Like the player injuries or just keeping guys fresh, you have to allow that roster to be moved up as well, because that's a part of the game. And now adding a whole entire extra game, that's going to be another consequence of this. So it makes sense. And I feel like with the way COVID changed things in terms of the roster, maybe they'll have that added flexibility. But
that's a good point. What they did with that and having the practice squads, so that would allow the NFL to keep more players on a roster, allow them to come back and forth, more like the 2-way contracts, or even in hockey, bringing them up and down from the minors, even though they don't have minors, but allowing them to do that. But those guys are on cheaper deals. And the NFL likes that. But having those extra players and allow them to come up and play on given weeks. I think if they maintain those same rules this year, at least that would make the rosters a little better.
If you're a football fan and not covering the games like us, with someone commented that you just don't want to cover an extra game, how do you think they would feel about it?
Well, first of all, I went 2 decades with the Bills, never having to worry about covering an extra game because they never made the playoffs. But I was doing 4 preseason games a year at the time too. Now they do cut one of those games out. Eventually I think they'll only have 2 preseason games, but whatever. Just for the preseason, that's not really impacting the main guys as much. I do think when I make these arguments, and I don't know if you know this, but I try to make arguments all the time. I always say, take it to an extreme, right? So let's say now, you say, well, it doesn't make that big of a difference and whatever. Say it was 20 games. You're like, well, hold on. Like, how many do we need? Yeah. I think even adding one and going in that direction doesn't really do anything for the fan base. Like, I think by the time we've played 16 NFL regular season games, we know who should be in and who shouldn't. It's not like you felt cheated that, oh, man, this team was really coming on. It's 16 games. They all matter. And you've added that. So while fans like it, you're a Bills fan. You're 13-3 last year. You are ready for the playoffs.
Yeah.
You are ready to go. And if you're another team that missed it by a game, you pretty much knew your team had a chance to get in there. So I don't think we need it. I really don't. And most fans I've talked to were like, yeah, I don't need an extra regular season game. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I understand why some people love it because, hey, it is an extra game of football. But now, if you're Sean McDermott, how much strategy also goes into, depending on where you're at, how it just changes the dynamics of what you do later on in the season?
Yeah, I think it does play in somewhat. I mean, it's not like I think you will say one week, well, guess what? Load management, Josh Allen's not playing this week. Yeah. I don't think that's happening. But I do think teams are trying to be smarter with realizing the ultimate goal, right, is to get these guys ready and having them play. So I think there's already been a part of that, but you're adding that extra game. And look, what happened at the end of the year in that Eagles-Washington game, when that can happen any year. It became a bigger deal because they pulled a guy in the middle of the game. But there's a lot of times at the end where teams do have nothing to play for.
Yeah.
And a move of draft picks at the end of the year, if you lose the game, whether you want to call it tanking or not, even the good teams that might have things wrapped up that would say, I'm going to sit a player, I'm going to sit my whole team. I think you're going to get to circumstances now where it's going to increase even more. Things are settled. So we'll see how much fans like it when week 16, teams just resting guys because
it's almost like,
we don't need to.
They're putting that third preseason game like at the end of the season for a lot of these teams. Like, think about it. Obviously, you can't rest everyone, but at the same point, I know they're taking away one of the preseason, like that fourth preseason game, and it's not going to be all the players who would be playing in that fourth preseason game. But the strategy completely changes. There's going to be a lot, and I feel bad for the teams that are bad because adding on another extra game, that's going to be tough.
Well, think about that though. I mean, it's I know somebody's probably watching this and going, you're making too much. It's just one game. I feel like the 16-game schedule with a 53-man roster is a battle of attrition. And maybe Bills fans feel a little bit differently because I'll say this as I knock on wood, they've still been really fortunate with injuries the last few years. You had John Brown, you had Milano, you had a little bit of that going on last year, but this team has been incredibly healthy. So maybe it didn't feel as much, but most teams, man, for stretches of the year, they're dragging, they lose a quarterback for 3 weeks. They lose this guy, you lose that guy. You're down 3 linemen. We had the whole COVID issue this year, which hopefully that's not an issue in 21 season. But you had weeks where like teams were decimated by injuries or COVID and trying to get by. So that part I kind of say like, it just didn't feel like we were like, oh, great, we need this.
Yeah.
I don't think we needed it.
Gotta be about the money. About the money.
But, you would think that even as greedy as they are, and they're all greedy, that they would come up with some other things in order to rectify the situation a little bit, add to the roster, and maybe that will happen, but they usually don't need to pay a few more players. This game is a violent game. Guys are out there and gone in a heartbeat. Pay a few more guys and expand the rosters a little. Because you've heard those suggestions that it'd be like, you have to rest every player 2 games and all. I don't want any of that mess.
Yeah, no.
I don't want a team where you got to designate 2, imagine paying to go to a Bills game and Josh Allen's not playing because it's designated rest game. I mean, come on. Though they do have Trubisky now, so they'll be fine.
Just throw him out there. Do you think we'll get paid more because there's an extra game?
Do we get paid?
No.
Yeah, I would say the answer to that is no.
No. All right. Sad
but
face.
you know, you never know.
All right.
Now
well, we want to we do know. We want to hear from you all in the comments. Let us know how you feel about the NFL adding that extra game. We want to hear from you. Make sure to like and subscribe if you liked our stuff. For Mike Catalana, I'm Jenna Cottrell. Thanks for tuning in to Buffalo Plus.